Mr. Chairman, before we get started, I'd like to introduce our new arborist, Max Waiter.
Waiter. Yeah, that's okay.
Waiter.
Yeah.
Max comes from us. He's got tons of experience. We're really fortunate to have him on board. He's been working with us for 3 years now.
Yeah, just over 3 years.
Just over 3 years, and he's been acting when Chuck was away. So he's well versed with the role, and we're fortunate to have him be able to step up. And it's sad to have lost Chuck, but we're very fortunate to have Max on board. So I wish you all welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And with that, I'll call the October 12th meeting of the Trees and Greenery Committee to order. And it occurred to me that back when, before we were on video, or even before we had a recording, we all had name tags in front of us, and which we've abandoned over the years, I guess. But let me introduce the committee: Patricia Bagley, Richard Adams, Deb Shea, Dennis Soto, Joanna Kelly, Max, you just met, AJ Newgreen, Michael Gilpin, Peter Watson, and Public Works Director Peter Rice. So first we have the minutes from the September meeting. We have a motion on that. Move to accept.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And Peter's already introduced Max, and so we will go to the
So, Mr. Chair, we're on tree removal request, and I'd like to make a motion to bring item 6, which is related to a number of trees in Penaway Manor, a sidewalk project, forward. If there's a second.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And what I thought we'd do on this would be, we'll open up for discussion on the entire Penaway Manor project.
Mr. Chairman. David DePost is our project manager, and Tyler Reese are here as well. If you'd like a brief presentation, just to orient everybody.
I think that would be helpful. And what I want to do is, David make a presentation, excuse me, and we'll discuss all the, rather than focus on individual trees. Anybody here that wants to talk about a specific tree, that's fine, but we'll put them all up at the same time.
One point of clarification on this: the previous 1 through 5, even though some of them are out there, are not generally connected to the sidewalk, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Morning, members of the committee. Dave DeFos from Public Works. Tyler Reese is here with me too, as we're working with me on the project. Mark Gotcha was pouring concrete on State Street. So originally this project was supposed to get built at the same time as State Street. They're getting their sidewalks for today. So here we are for a project for next year at this point. So this project is funded through the capital improvement plan. We have had 3 public meetings at this point. Most projects, almost all projects, are not unanimous in public support. This one has the majority of public support. We have, like I said, we've gone to a 3rd public meeting, and we have told the public at that meeting that we plan to move forward and construct this project in the spring. We are here today, as you know. I think you were all here for the prior presentation that we gave this spring, where we had a plan that showed 29 trees to be removed. We have, over the course of the summer, isolated a couple more trees that we decided that we don't absolutely have to take down. And Tyler tells me that tree number 21 over by George's Terrace actually is already removed. So at this point, we're looking for permission to remove 25 trees that are marked on the little plans in front of you. They are marked with an X and they are numbered. You will see that the road sidewalk is shown in blue on your plan. There is a future project to put sidewalks down to Decatur and Mesa. The location of that sidewalk is still to be determined, whether it's on one side of the road or the other. So for purposes of phase two, this is schematic, just kind of, this is where we're heading. So we're here to talk about project one. As I told you, we have walked this neighborhood multiple times at this point. Any tree that absolutely didn't need to be removed, we're working around, either by going around it or truncating width of the sidewalk slightly, or some other manner as to try to save the tree. Almost all these removals are because of root issues, where we cannot build an ADA compliant sidewalk with the trees in place. So with that being said, our plan is to, upon receiving approval from you, if we do, we will send this project out to bid sometime in December. We'll do tree removals over the winter. And the construction contract would include removing the stumps and constructing the sidewalk next year. Along with that, we're trying to fund the replacement of pavement at the same time, but we're still working on that for funding. So that's the project in a nutshell. I'm here to answer any questions you have. But essentially, this is more of an all or nothing type of project, so. Thank you.
Are there any questions for David?
David, will you replanting any of the 25?
We will be attempting to replant as many of them as possible. As you know, we have a huge number of trees coming next year for the 400. So we have already told members of the public that we will be planting many trees in here after we're done. We'll be picking trees that will not have the root issues that these trees had, and we'll be planting in the open spots. Yeah.
I guess my question is that contextually speaking, you know, I see that these trees are the trees that need to be removed for the sidewalk. But I guess I'm looking at the whole picture of what's out there. And it's always helpful for us if we don't mind removing diseased and trees that are on their way out, but you know, removing healthy trees on this committee is something that we don't particularly like to do.
Mhm.
So I know some of these trees are diseased, and Eversource has done a nice job on pruning some of those trees. But I just want to look at the whole picture, like what's going to be left standing and where is Eversource in the queue of what else is going to be out there for energy.
You want to speak to that?
Sure, I guess I can answer that. I'm Scott Richardson, I'm with Northern Tree Service on behalf of Eversource. Eversource is planning on doing a substantial upgrade to poles and wires throughout that neighborhood. They're in the planning stages and budget funding for that project. They do not know at this time when that will take place, whether it be next year or the year after. But that is another project that is coming to that neighborhood. That answers your question.
And at this point, it's just too premature to know how many trees are going to come in front of us to talk about.
Correct. It would all depend on where they decide to put the poles, or they should raise the poles, they keep them the same height,
Mhm.
what they're putting in for wire structure.
Might be possible to reroute some of the wires.
It's
into
highly
areas
possible.
that are
I don't know that until I
trees.
get the final plan that says,
right, but I can commit that Public Works will try to work with Eversource. We know their technicians well, and if there are areas that make sense to move wires across the street, because now the trees have been removed in order to save other trees, we will certainly try to do our best to do that.
Dave,
Yes.
given that the new sidewalks will be much wider than what's there currently, and what's there currently is overriding the roots of many of those trees. I mean, they've risen up and so has the sidewalk. If we're replanting, do we have any idea how, given the sidewalks will be wider, how much possibility there is to replant and what percentage?
There's still a very substantial grass strip out there for that. So the sidewalks are going to be around 2.5 feet wider than they are now. So the grass strip that's out there, I think, is 8 feet wide. So it'll still be 6 feet wide, which I think is still plenty wide enough to put in some trees.
Okay, I did get that sense when I drove
Yeah,
around the
it's-
neighborhood.
The grass strip is in its, you know, the street is not perfectly aligned like it would be in a modern street laid out with lasers and the street wanders, but in general, there's plenty of grass strip remaining.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And again, back to the whole zooming out and looking at the whole area, is there any sense, I don't know, Max, if you're up to speed on, what other trees are in, will be taken down even above Eversource? I think a lot of those trees were planted at the same time, and as we know, trees do come to the end of their lives, and it seems to me that a lot of these trees are at the end of their lives, or could be at the end of their lives in the next 10 years. So I was sort of thinking that, so we're, you replace these trees with, of course, the smaller trees that the city can manage, the sort of 3.5 diameter is sort of what the.
It's what we replant.
Mhm.
Typically, what we're looking at is, so we're going to, at least in 23, spring 23, we're gonna be planting the bare root trees, and the caliber on that is usually somewhere between 1.5 and 2 inches, not typically bigger, at least as far as I've seen from purchase, the potential inventory that they have. So.
Okay, so I was just thinking in the next 10 years, what's gonna be left behind, how we can roll it over. And still give Ganway the shade that it has.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Deb, this is a really good question, and it helps, but it's really it's not pertinent to today's work.
Okay.
I think it's more of a question for Max, and as we as a committee look at what we're doing for plantings this year, that we look at that in that context and we bring that up.
Okay.
So I think really, right now, the project before us is specific to the sidewalk itself. That will inform us what we want to do over the long, and with information from Eversource, that'll help us. But working with Max, working with you all, we can look at the types of trees, the condition of the trees, the ages, and then look at, some staggered plantings. However, I just want to, we're not, Dave's job was not to look at the whole context, it was really just to get this sidewalk project done. So I just respectfully.
So I would like to point out though, because I did leave it out of my initial presentation that the sidewalk is only going on one side of the street. The trees on the other side of the street are not being impacted by the sidewalk project. That doesn't mean that Eversource won't take some of them down when they do their project. Hopefully not too many, but the sidewalk is only on one side. And on the sidewalk side, only about half, and I don't have the exact figure. Tyler, do you? Only about half of them are being removed. So the other side, the sidewalk side, only about half. And the other side of the street, we're not removing. So when you look at it that way, only about a quarter, maybe a strong quarter of the trees are actually being.
Any other questions for Dave? There you go.
They pull up the pavement or whatever the sidewalk is on the side that you're
Not building on? Yes, yeah.
Dave, how was the decision made as to which side of the street the sidewalk goes on?
We actually did a survey, Mr. Chairman, and decided what side of the street would be less impactful to the trees. We started there.
And the width of the sidewalk, what determines that?
We need to build a sidewalk that's ADA compliant. Part of what ADA says is that we have to maintain the sidewalk system. So even though we have a tiered maintenance plan where we do the sidewalks that are most used first, and then the sidewalks that go to schools are right up there. And then we kind of branch out from spider form so that, eventually we get to all these sidewalks and we get them clear. So we're required to do that. So in order to limit the amount of damage that we do to residential properties, we have a standard of 5.5 feet. Sidewalk track is just under 5 feet wide. It's about 110 last time I measured it. So a 5'6" sidewalk, which is what you're getting here, gives us a little bit of play, about that much play. But the guys that usually by the time they're playing these sidewalks, they're not for a week. and they're a little tired. So it gives them a little chance to stay on the sidewalk and not rip up loam from people's yards, so they don't have to go back in the spring and do a bunch of repairs. So that's why we kind of standardized 5'6" whenever we can get it. Sometimes we get 5'3", and like I said, in some places here, we'll be narrowing the sidewalk up and providing a little bit of a pad on the backside, so we go around a mature tree that we're saving without damaging the tree. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Any other questions? for me? Okay, why don't we open up the public hearing at this point?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Morning, my name is Manuel Garganta. I live at 471 Colonial Drive. I'm number 19 on the list. I've lived there for quite a long time. I've seen these trees grow to the point where we've had a few come down, hit houses. We've had one that went out my electrical service right beside my house. They're responsible for that. These trees have been there since the place was built in 1940 by the Defense Corps of America. Those trees were planted there after that, which could have been a couple of years, who knows, but they're not streetscapes. These things grow 60, 70, 80 feet. They're quite large. In my house, part of my house, I'm being a surveyor. From grade, I got a hump in my front yard that goes about 2.5 to 3 feet. Kids love it. They ride their bikes over it. The problem is it's a safety net. We see people walking in the street because some of the portions are paneling. You can't put a stroller down there. I have a 2-year-old grandson that loves riding over the humps, but we can't take him in the street because we don't want him to get hit. So I think this is a good project. I know there are people that are not for it. I don't want to take trees down. I just had a limb taken off my tree that was over 100 feet tall, but I didn't want to take the tree. So I tried to save the tree. The front of my house, I'm going to hate to lose the shade, but I think the streetscape trees, there's quite a few variety of trees that people are looking at. Streetscape, a lot lower. They may not provide shade for my house because I'm getting up there. I can see them grow to their full length. But I think this is a good project. We have a lot of people that are in the neighborhood that have been spending a lot of money on their houses. We have 2 places that have put a whole second story on during the process. I think this goes along with the neighborhood. We're not looking for brick sidewalks, not that fancy. A good cement sidewalk would do. There's plenty of room in front of my house. I don't know what the decision is going to be, but I think it's a good, viable project. And it'll enhance the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rubini Zagiri. I live at 337 Colonial Drive in Portsmouth. I'm one of the people that's going to be affected by the tree removal, but I kind of just want to say, what are we trying to solve by destroying these trees and adding this sidewalk, right? Is it speeding? Well, we've done a study, right? The average speed is 18 miles an hour, right? You know, what overarching problem are we trying to solve, or are we doing something just to do something, right? Have there been any accidents, right? Not that I know of, right? They keep mentioning the bicycles. Bicycles are not supposed to be ridden on sidewalks. These are skateboards, right? So, you know, what I'm thinking is that this is not a necessary project to do, right? For many other reasons, let me just kind of go here. So what I really want to do is, you know, talk about a case-by-case basis. So with Manny, he has a problem with his tree, right? Can we do something on a case-by-case basis? Say this tree is a problem, it needs to be removed, instead of removing all these trees and putting what I feel and some other people feel is unnecessary sidewalk, right? A lot of these people who are for this project probably are not walkers of the neighborhood or will use the sidewalk, right? So I understand the notion that, okay, I walk all the time, maybe it's dangerous or something like this, but a lot of people, are not walkers of the neighborhood, therefore will probably or for sure not use this sidewalk, right? And again, we've done a study, this is a closed neighborhood. This is not Islington Street, it is not a through neighborhood, we don't have problems with cars, being a danger. I feel people have walked the streets for 40 years and I think they will continue. And I think this will have an opposite effect, right? If you're going to get rid of all of these trees on one side, you're getting rid of all of the shades. Who here likes to walk in direct sunlight in the summer? Nobody. People are just going to walk on the street like they've always done on the other side of the street, right? Not using this heat sink, heat island of a sidewalk, and it frankly does not fit the neighborhood. It's a white 5.5 foot ADA sidewalk that is not necessary, right? And as Craig has spoken before, we are the only neighborhood that has a sidewalk. Thus, the neighborhood next to us, Holly Lane, why don't they have a sidewalk, right? The neighborhood across from us, they don't have a sidewalk either. Why aren't they trying to put sidewalks over there, right? And I think that this money, and I understand the argument that, okay, we need to put money in our neighborhood, maybe our neighborhood is a little bit forgotten or neglected or whatever, but we can use that $600,000 for a bunch of other things instead of ripping out all these trees for what I feel is a very marginal benefit, right? I think a lot of people are not going to use this sidewalk once it's implemented, again, because of this this shade problem. And again, the kids on the bikes, they're not supposed to be on bikes, are not supposed to be on sidewalks, either are skateboards, right? And so this idea that, the kids are going to use this, they're, frankly, it's not supposed to be that way, right? And the kids ride the bikes through the streets just fine. And again, we've done a study. I mean, speeding problem is not there. I don't have any record of any accidents, right? And so this is just kind of my thought process. And lastly, I'd like to say, so a lot of people are benefiting at the expense of other people like me, right? So people across the street, they're going to gain yard. They're going to take out this ugly sidewalk. They're going to have a large, beautiful yard. They're going to keep their trees. And people like us, well, we're losing a lot of things, right? And for me, I'm a single income person. I work from home. My wife doesn't work. I have a small child. And I cannot afford to have my heating or cooling bill increase so much from all this direct sunlight that's going to be beating on my house now, right? So it's very easy to be generous with other people's money and say, oh yeah, just take them down. Unlike us, are being affected negatively. And I feel that, again, this whole project has a very marginal benefit for a very large expense for a group of people. But again, if you have nothing to lose, of course you want, people to upgrade and do these types of things, right? So let me see. My last point being, so again, these increases in the bills are in perpetuity. We cannot go back, right? This is a permanent project. So again, if we do this and say, oh, well, maybe it wasn't a good idea. Well, we can never say, let's put the trees back, right? So again, and again, my cooling bills are in perpetuity. So if I go up 20%, that's forever. The trees take forever to grow. I might not even be alive to see the shading. So again, thank you, Minnie, for recognizing me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good.
Hello, my name's Greg Simmons. I live on 9 Worthing Road, which is in Canaway Manor. I am totally against the new sidewalk. I just soon have to rip up the old ones and be done with it. In my particular case, I have tree number 10 and 11 in front of my house, which are both going to be removed. Which means, in the summer, it'll be direct sunlight, especially on my house, as well as my lawn. Well, right now, with direct sunlight, the tree section lawn that has shade, grass is green. If it doesn't have shade, turns brown. I just feel that once those trees are gone, my whole front yard is going to be brown. As far as safety aspect of the sidewalks, I don't know if anybody's looked with Portsmouth Police Department as far as what they've had for accidents involving pedestrians and big motor vehicles. Or bicycles and motor vehicles. You know, I looked at one at, when Parkers, I guess they're talking about the whole thing over there about doing sidewalks. It was a 10-year look back and there was no accidents with pedestrians and there was one accident with a bicycle because as they usually do, they drove through a stop sign into a car. So I think this is a situation where get rid of the old sidewalks and I don't feel that the new ones needed. Street's fine. Slow traffic as far as I'm concerned compared to the rest of the city. There's other neighborhoods that have no sidewalks. You go off from Islington Street in the Essex Ave area, which is a lot of side streets, there's no sidewalks there at all. And you go over the by Echo Ave and Maple Street in that area, they don't have sidewalks. Like I said, I'm against it. I'm not a very good public speaker, but thank you.
Anybody else like to speak?
Yeah, this is this project.
Yeah, I think we're gonna focus on the sidewalk project.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll have a moment to speak about the removal of the wording after this. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak?
Morning. Live at 93 Colonial Drive. I've been there for the last 45 years. And this is probably the first time I've spoken in favor of anything. But I have strong support of this project. It is raised about bicycles on sidewalks, which is 100% correct. How about considering mothers with strollers, mothers walking with children, elderly people? We have quite a combination of people, elderly, middle-aged like me. But, children with young children, and I think those things need to be considered as well. You know, I don't have any record of accidents or anything like this to speak from, but I think it's going to happen someday. Okay, like I said, the elderly with the walkers. A couple weeks ago, there was an individual who was with a walker. He's having trouble right in front of my house. I went out and talked with him, stood with him for a while, so he got collected again. And his only option was sitting in the street with his walker. You know, that isn't safe no matter how you cut it. And once again, I am very strong supporter of this project. Petition I turned in had quite a few names. David wrote this project.
How many, I didn't see the petition. How many names are on it?
132.
They're all residents of Kenworth.
Yes. 32 names are on the petition. Peter has a copy. But I could do something about sidewalk. It's 45 years I've been there. I really can't recall anything about these sidewalks. And if you look at them today, they definitely got 45 years worth of use out of them. It's probably older. But that's it. Does anybody has any questions for me?
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
My name is Lo Cooper. I live at 15 Colonial Drive. I guess I just had, I think they did a good job of adjusting the program and saving a few trees, so I appreciate that. So I had a couple questions. One was, is there a possibility that as they build the sidewalk, there will be more trees that need to be taken? And what is there sort of a process to do that, or is that just happening?
During the course of construction.
So say they start constructing and, they realize that maybe this tree does need to go, that originally thought didn't need.
I think David can answer that one.
So we've taken pretty comprehensive look at these trees, and we think that we have 100% of what we're gonna need to remove. If for some reason something happens and we have to another tree, we would definitely have to come back to this committee and get approval to do that. With the exception of the tree is like leaning because something happened, it's about to fall into the road, then it's an emergency. But generally speaking, we would have to do that.
And my only other question is, I think in the other meeting, and it's brought up a little bit today, the possibility of having part of this project be to plant new trees and, make sure that the canopy is restored. Or, possibly even bigger than it is now, at least net for the neighborhood. What are sort of the steps as a resident or assurances we can get that something like that is going to happen?
That came up at the last meeting, and there was definite assurances that trees would be replaced, and that there is a program, and David mentioned that the strip between the sidewalk and the street is sufficient places to plant trees. It's been the practice of the city for, I don't know, at least the last several years, that if it's a place that where a tree is appropriate and there is not space between the sidewalk and the street, that the city will has the ability and will plant trees on someone's lawn if that's an appropriate alternative.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is a great time to take a plug for next year. We're doing 400 trees on the 400. 200 of those trees are going to be residents. They can pick them up and have them plant them themselves. 200 will be city planted trees, and we're planning on restoring, the trees that are removed as part of that 200 that we do. But there's an additional 200 that are going to be available. Working with AJ at the Urban Forestry Center, we're setting up a time in April for the trees to be picked up. We'll have an informational card and how to plant properly, a little bucket of compost, and you could do that with your kids or your partners or whatever. But that's we very much support continuing planting, and annually we plant 100 trees throughout the city. And it's something that the city's been committed to. We've been a tree city for over 20 years. And we are very much committed to maintaining trees. Concerns about canopy, there is a period of time between when a tree is removed and a new tree is planted that there is some loss in canopy. However, that comes back very quickly, much quicker than people understand. I had 2 trees, large trees removed in front of my house, and they are now very large. They appear mature trees and they provide shade, and that's been within 10 years. So they do come back relatively quickly.
Thank you very much.
Would like to add, this will give us an opportunity to diversify the trees in this community. I made a bet with Tyler when we were out posting these removals. Mike, I bet you it's about 80% of the trees you post are linden, and that's they're messy, they're big, they're nuisance in a lot of cases when they reach maturity. So this will, we'll be able to get way more variety of trees.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Garganta. I live at 423 Colonial Drive. I grew up at 471 Colonial Drive. So I've been around these trees for a long time. I think this project is a great compromise between doing dual sidewalks again. I think, removing them from one side of the street and still allowing the neighborhood to retain the benefit of having new sidewalks is important. Some people mentioned that a lot of neighborhoods don't have them. I feel that We are fortunate to have them. We just don't have the luxury of being able to use them safely. Because for decades, they've been unpassable to all but people who are the most spry. You know, safety is a concern. You know, it is important to allow little kids the ability to try to learn how to ride a bike or a tricycle or whatever little toy they push up and down the road right now, because the sidewalk is not an alternative for them. I think we're building a project for the future, for the next generation of the neighborhood. The folks who built the neighborhood had the foresight to plant a lot of trees. We're benefiting from them now, but all things do pass. And when you have 80-year-old linden trees, they are incredibly messy. They are doing damage to the sewer systems in the neighborhood. I know we're not going to solve all of those problems, but by removing the number of trees that are proposed, which I don't think is significant in the grand scheme of the whole neighborhood, I think you're going to improve some of those sewer issues for the neighbors who are having them. So my tree doesn't come down now as part of this project. I'll be in front of you asking to take the tree down shortly so I can replace my sewer line. One of the things, the questions I have is I would like to have some say in the type of tree that goes back in front of my house. I don't know if we have the ability to select the trees. You know, I don't have any power line. You know, I envision a tree that could mature to a decent height in the future, not a power line friendly tree that will only grow 20 feet. So, you know, if there's an opportunity for us to select when trees go back, I noticed some of the trees that are being planted now have a more shrub-like appearance, which I don't think is great in form. They're low, multi-stem, multi-trunk trees that don't seem to have a street tree form. So, you know, I think I'd like to be thoughtful about what goes back. The other piece about the project is what people aren't really saying is we have the opportunity on the side of the road that is the sidewalks are getting removed. There are still a number of properties that do not have trees. So I'm sure as part of this project, we could do some planning to add even more trees than are being taken out through the process of this project. The city does own that strip of land. I know we typically say to neighbors, if you want one, you can have one. If you don't want one, we're not going to put one there. But there are a number of properties that don't have trees on that strip, city-owned strip. So I think the net gain could be that we're going to replace more than 25, 26 trees. That's the whole project. So just want to come and say I am in support of it. I will not miss my sap dropping, leaf dropping, branch dropping linden too much. It does not provide shade on my house. In the summertime, because the sun is so high in the sky that it pretty much just shades my sidewalk at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Look forward to the project.
I have one question for Everforth, if that's okay. I know I spoke already. Did I ask it? Is there a possibility that you bury the power lines instead of bring them, replace all these poles? Because, I mean, is that a possibility that would help and then constantly removing trees, right? So would burying them, because I know a lot of other neighborhoods have buried power lines, and since we're redoing the power lines, how much of a possibility is it to bury them instead of redoing the poles and running into this problem in the future?
A lot of your new developments now, they're requiring the lines to be buried aesthetically for that, and that's a very easy process when they're building a new development. If you think about the power lines that run through your neighborhood being above ground, I now have to run them underground, basically in that same spot. Everywhere they're above ground, I now have to dig a trench. When I dig that trench, every tree that's near that power line will die. So losing a couple here and there to replace some poles is a much better situation than losing every tree, starting over.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can add to that too. The Eversource will not pay for it. It'll be at the expense of the city. And to bury utilities is millions of dollars. And you know, it's a reasonable request. I mean, many people have asked that throughout the city. And when we have opportunities to leverage Eversource's work to get it buried, we do that. However, we found that the expense associated with it is very, very significant.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Thank you all very much. So, I'll come back to the committee.
I'd like to ask, what is the expected function of this committee today? If this project has already been approved, whether we like it or not, it seems to me the horses has farm. All of this committee thereafter would be primarily advisory, this to deal with the situation post. Continuing in that vein, what city agency approved this, and what's the status of that?
If I can speak to the process, this was a capital improvements request made 10 years ago, probably, David. It's been on the list of sidewalk replacement projects for a number of years, and there's been a number of people advocating and asking why hasn't it been done yet. So the city council approved funding of this project. There is no body like planning board or something like that that weighs in on it. It's part of normal operations. It's part of what our job is, this Department of Public Works, to maintain infrastructure. If funds are provided, and we are expected to do this based on our job. I can't speak to the, whether this committee could effectively veto that or not. I would point to the survey that was done showing an overwhelming support in the neighborhood for this project. We've looked at alternatives. I think it's a reasonable approach, and short of getting into a philosophical debate about our role, I would suggest I'll make a motion that we accept the recommendations of the department to move forward with this project, to remove these trees and then replant with the input of the committee, as well as input from residents about species and location moving forward. If I get a second.
I would say, Dick, that I've always been trying to be careful that our motions are to recommend removal. And that as a committee, we don't have the authority to require removal. We're recommending to Public Works. I think that's how the committee started years ago as a so there's a public forum to discuss these issues. And I don't know, I think you raise a good point, but practically speaking, I don't think you could come in or it makes sense to have this committee to be the first stop on a process. Well, we might want to put sidewalks in Panaway Manor or Maple Haven or anywhere else. And go to the committee and decide to ask approval of this committee or recommendations of this committee when the project may never get funded, may never get built. And I think I understand what you're saying, but I think that this is the logical time after it's been engineered and funded to go through it. But it's I think a difficult position for us to be in, and I have reservations about getting this far, and that whether this committee would have whether this committee steps in and says, no, you can't do it. I think city council has appropriated the money, and it's been determined that over a period of years in different forums that this is an appropriate activity. So it didn't really satisfy your question answer.
Well, you pretty much are echoing what I think I just said. The question back to what are we supposed to do at this point? Quite a few months ago, we had a discussion about the feasibility and wisdom of the project. And remember what the maybe it's fine at the moment, but it seems to me that was the time for us to have any significant influence that, as I said, I think the horse is left in turn.
If I may share. As I recall from that last meeting, we stopped the process. We went back. The concern was that it wasn't clear to the residents what trees were going to be impacted and the extent of the trees that were impacted. So at the committee's request, we went back and we developed a more detailed presentation relative to the trees. Those trees were presented, and subsequent involvement of the residents reinforced the desire for the project. And we reaffirmed that the trees that we were going to remove were clearly communicated to the public. The committee, as I see it, has the ability to heighten awareness of protection of the trees, advocate for the trees, and make sure that staff isn't just arbitrarily removing trees. For example, that section of South Street where we just removed sidewalk, there were 3 mature trees there. As an engineer, civil engineer, I want a nice straight sidewalk. I want dual sidewalks on a roadway. I would have just torn those trees out, not really, but as a traditional civil engineer, that's what I would have done. Then put a big drain pipe down the center. But you know, we brought that project to the committee. The committee reaffirmed the importance of those trees there, and that it outweighed the importance of having an additional sidewalk. And so we worked to make sure we had alternatives to get people across the street to the sidewalk. And that was because of the input of this committee and the continued support of what we do from an urban tree management approach. You know, it's really, as you all can attest, our sophistication as an organization has, you know, we've matured significantly how we address trees, how we manage our urban trees. So I guess, you know, this is a good topic, and if we need further input from the legal department about, you know, what by authorization or ordinance on the authorities of the tree committee, I would, you know, be more support of that. But at this point, I feel like the process has been one of advisory. Process has really been a good process, and it helps continue to reinforce my staff the importance of managing the trees in a responsible manner. So I guess I'm not, you know, we could hear that deeper, but I guess your question was, you know, what role do you have in this? I would say at this point it's just an affirmation that what has been presented is reasonable, and that it's something that, yes, we would regret losing mature trees, but at the same time we have a process in place. It was followed, and it wasn't done arbitrarily.
Anybody else in the committee? Yeah.
Well, I've given this a lot of thought. This process, this project has really pained me. It's a lot of big trees, and I really value short, large trees. And after going out and walking and talking with neighbors out of Panaway, I did realize that, you know, it is not a thoroughfare, and that the Traffic and Safety Committee did not really warrant, does not warrant sidewalks out there. I just sort of, so I did look at the whole process, and I think that what is going on with the trees out there is that they are mitigating, you know, the water, air quality, cooling your homes, all the things that trees are supposed to do are really working out there for you, especially being near 95 NPs. I also looked in, there's something it's very unique out there, which you haven't. It's a really feeling of welcoming. You have small homes that really come together with community. I was so impressed by what you have out there, and I think the trees do add a lot of context and really increase the mental health and community out in Panaway. I think the city's done a terrific job. They've been very mindful, very thoughtful, very really, they did a real deep dive into what's going on out there. I did hear and hang on to your planting for the future like they did 70 years ago. I really love the idea of that we can replant with diversity. I think that's really important, are educated about that than they were 70 years ago. And I think the commitment from the city to residents of Panway to replace as many trees as possible, and that you will have choices to choose from. That is true. I think that Chuck has been amazingly supportive with that. And people, I know I've spoken to many people that really do appreciate that choice. So I just had to, I've given this a lot of thought, and I appreciate everybody weighing in and the time that I've spent. So I just had to say that.
Thank you, Deb. I would point out that probably less charitable people might characterize most of the people on this committee as being somewhat weird. In that I think all of us, we anguish whenever we approve the removal of a tree. I mean, that is weird. And I don't think this or a tree, especially a healthy tree, if we've approved it at all, it's been with great reluctance. And so this is presents a difficult question for the committee. I think when I weigh everything, I think that I support removing, I reluctantly support removal, but I think it's the appropriate thing. I think we had to weigh benefit of sidewalks against the cost of removing the trees, not about the social cost, the aesthetic cost. And so I think it's the appropriate action. Anybody else?
Would you like to make a motion to take them all as one group?
We have a motion.
I can make a motion. You meant to say
In my opinion, would be fully funded project, in my mind, a worthy project based on safety and with the citizen support in Everett's petition, this project should move.
Thank you. Anybody else? I would call for the motion. All in favor of the motion. Anyone opposed? Opposed. Yeah, in favor. Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'll go back to the first part of the agenda. 22 Whipple Court. Anyone here, speak to 22 Court? Sorry, can you speak louder, please?
23 Whipple Court.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
You can depend on me for that.
Max, maybe you can,
Sure.
listen back.
Yeah, so just like the majority of trees out in Panaway, it is a written right of way in front of 23 Whipple Court. Received a call from the homeowner, or I believe it was the homeowner, yes. Just declaring it a nuisance for the property. I told him that typically what we do is we can go out and prune and try and remedy any of these issues that they see with the tree. And typically that's what we end up doing if removal is not an option. So it was that homeowner's opinion to still encourage the removal of the tree. So posted it, and here we are talking about it. But the tree in general looks relatively healthy. I see no major issues with the tree or any. Obviously, it is heaving the sidewalk, of course, but aside from that, I think it is a healthy tree, and we are more than happy to go in and prune it.
Anybody have any questions for Max?
I agree with your assessment that he is very happy.
Yes.
Yes, I agree as well, except for the sidewalk being raised, but
Right.
cutting the tree down. Change that.
I mean, that's the worst sidewalk listing of any tree that I think I've ever seen, particularly bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. I guess I have no opinion on. It's not even showing up as an improvement project on this map, so. I don't know if that stands to reason that maybe the sidewalk gets removed in the future or whatever the case is. I'm not here to wait on that particular foot. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, the tree is totally happy right where it's at. And I personally intend on seeing it stay.
Peter,
Go ahead, Pat.
just quick question. So even with phase two, Whipple Court is not included in phase two.
Correct, which indicates the sidewalk would be removed from that section.
Take it out.
All the asphalt's being removed.
Yeah,
All over Panaway.
No, yeah, in the sections that don't have new sidewalks, yes.
Oh, okay.
So it's Whipple Court, Georges Terrace, a lot of the other smaller sort of just circles branching off of Decatur and Colonial.
Thank you.
Good clarification.
Uh-huh.
Do we have a motion to not recommend?
I make a motion not to recommend removing this healthy tree. I second.
Joanna, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
1137 South Street. Anybody here on 1137 South Street? Matt?
Yeah, so this is another homeowner request. It is a pin oak that is pretty much exactly between two driveways. The issue the homeowner sees with the tree is that it is a line of sight issue. It's essentially crowding the two driveways, which again, I said we have no problem with pruning and remedying that. Yeah, healthy pin oak tree. It looks totally fine. It's not mature, but it's definitely a very well-established tree, and it is very happy.
Max, what are the trees that are being crowded?
I'm sorry.
What type of trees are being crowded?
There's another, so I didn't, there is a tree, a private tree nearby,
Right.
and I didn't recognize what tree that was.
It looks like a maple.
Is it?
Is it a
Okay.
maple on the right hand side?
I think this is,
maple on the side is on the left.
looking, yeah, from across the street, it's on the left side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And so we can prune for that as well. I mean, it's, there certainly is like a healthy limit for what we take. We prune trees, obviously, but in these two cases, for growing into sort of their property and being a nuisance to other trees, I think it's a viable option. To prune, just the prune, yes, just the prune. It is near power lines too, so that might present an issue, but that's long, even after I retire, I think that'll be a major issue for the infrastructure. But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, and he's got headers overhead, so it's less of an issue.
Less than that.
Yeah,
Michael, did you have something?
When I drove by to look at it, it's in a difficult position because of the traffic on South Street, and I really don't want to be backing out of that driveway and then have anything in my line of sight. So I thought that was the main issue.
Yeah, so I mean, it is a lot. So what the homeowner initially called about was a line of sight issue, but I saw that tree set so far back that I don't live there, and I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not the neighbor that also has to deal with it. So I understand that it may present that issue. Looking at it from the street and sort of when I walked along the sidewalk to sort of, and obviously around the tree, I did think it was set far enough back for that. As it is right now, in 10 years, maybe the tree has gotten girthier and now it's a much greater issue. For now, I don't necessarily see it as that. And if the homeowner from 1137 is here to argue that, I would have been open to hear that opinion, but
Okay, thank you.
No, I tend to agree. I think the other thing that tree is high enough. Sight line is probably why it's. Maybe just leave this, property.
Yeah.
So it's 3 years to challenge that, how long to this probably.
I don't know if removing the tree will alleviate that, because it's also right before a bend and. I mean, if cars went the appropriate speed for the area, then it might be a little bit. Yeah, it is, yes, so I don't yeah, anyway, it is a challenging street, but I don't know if removing the street will.
I'll make a motion.
Can I say one more? I just wanted to add, when it comes to removing oak trees, I do especially struggle with oak trees because I think oak trees are messy for owners, and I think there's a tendency to want to get rid of oaks. But I've been educating myself about oaks in a book that I'm referring to, The Nature of Oaks by Doug Tallamy. It's all about oaks, and one of the things he talks about is that the amazing service that an oak tree has for wildlife. And Dennis can certainly attest to this as being an entomologist himself. There's a web, he talks about, unfortunately, the diverse web of life that is associated with oaks goes unnoticed and thus unappreciated by most homeowners and even many trained biologists, and they choose to cut them down. But there's an impressive lifespan of a single tree will drop 3 million acorns and served as a lifeline for countless creatures, including dozens of birds, rodents, bears, raccoons, all types. And so I just have to throw that out as my advocates about the trees.
Thank you. I move to do pruning to the tree and monitor.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
337 Thornton Street.
This tree is kind of a nuisance, it's kind of, my driveway now, and the sidewalk. And it has to be this tree, all towards my. And it's just a nuisance, like the branches are falling off, almost hit the kid the other day, damaging. Last year, sometime COVID, so fox and but sometime last 2 years, it got approved. There's lots of dead wood, all in there, it's falling off on my cars.
Thank you. Max, you have a chance to this.
It did. Yeah, I take a little bit of offense to being the end of the street because I was the one that pruned it during this season. When I was sent out to prune that tree, the objective was to get branches off the house, raise up the street and sidewalk corridors. So with a tree that age, it will look pretty silly and kind of top heavy after something like that. But another pin oak, I believe. So those have a tendency to grow downward. Well, limb is attached and then it sort of grows a little bit downward. So to properly raise it, it needed to be lifted quite a bit. Just a little insight into why it's the ugliest tree in Portsmouth. But I also think it's still a healthy tree despite some branches coming out. They will die back, twigs, intermittent branches will just start dying. And if we have to go out and prune it again and hopefully remove any hazards that still remain, I can't speak to the long-term effects of the roots and the condition of your driveway or your vehicles, but I didn't notice any in comparison to the Panway Manor sidewalks. I did not notice an extreme deformation of the sidewalk there.
The city has already come on for the sidewalk. Yeah, it's crowding my most beautiful tree.
Yeah.
It's the first thing you see when you come to town. Yeah, but it is, I just.
Max,
Yeah.
can I ask you, so when I looked at that tree, it seems like that it's kind of, from the street level, it seems a little built up and there seems to be exposed roots there.
Right.
It looks kind of weird, you know, like that.
It looks like the tree out of Poltergeist.
So I'm wondering if that tree goes, what will happen to all of that kind of soil and space and what will happen there?
So let's just imagine that we do remove this tree. We will go in and stump grind the roots out, anything that's pretty much showing that grade, and get the majority of that cluster out of the ground. Those roots are also holding that slope together, so
Right.
if we stump grinds, it'll be all loosened up. We don't really do, at least in the immediacy of the stump grinding, we level it off with the grindings and kind of we go on our way, and later down the line, it'll potentially get moved and seeded, but that's assuming that no other trees planted there, which would likely be the case just because it's city right of way, and ultimately something else would likely go in that spot. So yeah, I mean that. Yeah, so it will have many different over the course of the project, it would have many different I guess compositions, I guess, of that soil, if that makes sense. So
Does it hold up the sidewalk? Does it impact the sidewalk once it's gone?
yeah, I mean, I guess the only way that we would know that is if there were, I mean, we're not gonna go in there and grind out roots or anything like that, but assuming there might be some substantial roots in there that eventually decompose, it could cause some structural integrity issues with the sidewalk, but ultimately,
It's like the Appalachian Trail.
So, Mr. Chair, there's somebody on Zoom that would like to weigh in.
Natalie?
Hi, I apologize. I wanted to speak about the one before on South Street. So if you want to finish this conversation, I've been on Zoom since like 5 minutes after 8, and I'm not sure. But if you want to finish this conversation and come back to the South Street one, I would like to weigh in on that, please.
Okay, we'll finish this then. Okay, so we've heard Max, we've heard from. Anybody have any questions?
In my short time on this committee, I think Thornton Street has probably suffered or endured the most dramatic landscape change of any street. Between Eversource and their road selection.
The trees on, I was walking down.
It's
Actually. Yeah, it was.
Chairman,
Flies.
I'm sorry, if typically this is not an interaction thing, there's a public hearing and the residents come up to speak to the topic and then sit down, it's not an interactive. If the committee decides that they would like to allow continued questions and input, we should just acknowledge that and have that person come forward to the speakers or the microphone so that it can get recorded properly. So I understand the process, but I just want to make sure we all are clear that if people are, it's not an interactive process without the committee.
What's my first one? We have the information we need down. I guess the question is, we and remove I don't. Maybe I have a lower standard. I didn't think it was such a, that was a good looking tree. We have a motion to recommend removal. All right.
recommend not to remove.
Makes a motion to recommend not removal. Sends that second by Dennis. Discussion.
If I could do a friendly amendment to have Max go out and review additional pruning if necessary. I'll have our sidewalk staff take a look at the condition of the sidewalk just to see if there's any additional repairs necessary.
Maybe add what you did on the last one to monitor it.
Yes.
Any call the question? So all in favor of the motion as made by Michael and amended, say
Aye.
all vote. It's coming. Yeah.
Thank
This
you.
one's fun. Good job. Natalie, come back to you.
Hi, thank you. So I don't know if you can go back since you already voted on it, but some points that were brought up about the tree on South Street. So I live next door to Madeline. I live at 1121 South Street, so we do share that tree. And a couple of the points that were brought up were the safety and visibility issues. When we are pulling out of our driveway, we cannot see anyone walking on the sidewalk or driving. It is a very safety concern. We do have two small children as well. So when we're pulling out, we cannot see anyone going from the north. And Madeline has difficulty seeing people coming from the south. So that was brought up by one of the committee members, and I did want to emphasize how challenging it is, especially when school is in session and there are numerous cars and walkers going back and forth. So that is a concern of ours with the tree, and that was one of the main reasons that we wanted that to be removed. So I did want to make sure that the committee was aware of those sentiments.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comments.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would request that the folks originally making the motion and second reconsider. And I would ask those folks to do that. And I know if they choose not to, then it's an issue.
Well, I think out of courtesy to Natalie, that since she was waiting to speak, that we voted. I appreciate the information and changed my mind, but I want to let her know that I think he appreciates the comment. Sorry, she was not sitting through that for a whole hour, but so that I think I can leave.
Just a little bit of this. You know, the arbor, the adjacent maple tree and the adjacent arbors, you know, it's your line of sight issue. Coming in essentially from the south side of this, I think got it here, if you want to see it.
I can try to get it on the screen too.
And then that becomes a privately owned. The assumption is that the tree is privately owned next door. Well, I was gonna say, so it is possible that it's also a city tree.
It is a city tree. We looked at the property line. I couldn't hear exactly if you were asking if that tree is the assumption that it's a private tree, or if you're talking about a different tree. I apologize. I couldn't hear very clearly.
Sorry, it was the adjacent tree, you know, the adjacent tree and then the adjacent arbor down the road at the house with the white fence.
I see. Thank you.
Trying to get there, sorry. Where are we talking?
Keep going.
This one right here.
Yeah.
So the tree in question is a pin
Yeah,
oak, just,
yeah.
yes.
So I'm sorry, did we vote to reopen the person who motioned, made a motion and seconded, did they agree to open this?
Yeah, those are each other.
Okay, second as well. I will second.
I'll reopen.
So personally, I, you know, from a safety standpoint, I am very sympathetic to what the property owner is saying. It's a difficult road to back into. It is very difficult. People, you know, unfortunately speed along that section of roadway. There are a lot of pedestrians. And for those reasons, I'm comfortable removing that tree, but I understand the committee's position is maybe different.
Do those hedges belong to the property owner? Making the request?
I'm not sure where the property line is next. Do you recall where the property line
It's set back enough that that tree is certainly on city property. I do not have the exact figure.
Yeah, oftentimes property owners will take hedges out. When there's difficulty, I had hedges on the corner of South and Newcastle. It's very difficult for people to see. I took them out because it was dangerous. But that was a personal choice. But the city could have taken them out because they're on city property if they chose.
Hadn't realized that there were school children who actually walk that. I mean, I hadn't thought about pedestrians. I was more.
Oh, yeah, if you go there in the morning, it's a heavily trafficked area from pedestrians.
So that's the high school crossing.
Right.
Yes, high school crossing.
Right there, so.
For me, as much as I would save every tree I possibly could, I don't think children's safety should come second to that. So I would vote to remove it.
In light of sort of new looking at this, could we put this on pause for a month?
Sure.
Sure.
I mean, I just looked at it from a tree health perspective and, there's no lower limbs. I mean, the tree's 12 plus inches wide, the height that somebody's sitting in a car. They didn't measure it, didn't sit in a car, they didn't look at, from that in.
If I may, Mr. Chair. If the committee is willing to reconsider, I will have the traffic engineer do some site distance measurements, put a camera out there, and we'll do a brief analysis to see if from a traffic safety standpoint, it's one thing.
I would appreciate that, Peter, especially now that school's in. I think that's when it gets to be really dicey. I think that's a really wonderful point, Natalie. I know that my children walk back and forth that space a lot.
So if they can do that, especially when as kids are coming to school and as they're.
Yep, what we do is we have traffic cameras, so we can leave up for days on a time. And
Right.
we can monitor the behavior of traffic, and hopefully we can capture the residents coming in and out of the area. Get a feel for that safety.
And you'll come back with a recommendation.
You will come back with a recommendation.
Fabulous, thank you.
So that was Peter's motion and seconded by Dennis. All in favor?
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I apologize for the delay in seeing you there.
It's okay. There were bigger fish to fry today, but I appreciate you making the time to circle back. So thank you very much.
So does that take us to 618 Colonial Drive?
Yes, yes. As the note says, so this, I guess so when I went to post this tree, there were nails in the tree suggesting that it was posted for removal 2 years ago. I am not certain of the what came of that committee meeting or how it was weighed. So I posted it for the homeowner at the homeowner's request, and here we are. So another Linden, it is a previous utility line clearance prune, so it's very one-sided, leaning toward the home. And there are some basal wounds that obviously can suggest certain things are occurring down there, but I'm not sure. The tree looks overall pretty rigorous despite being one-sided. Aside from that, yeah, that's about it as far as I'm concerned.
Same one that had the big
Yeah.
lid in it.
Yeah. Sorry, was there another question?
There was a tree, but I can't follow it specifically this.
Oh, I see.
It had a split.
This one did have a crack. Right. I thought.
Yeah, I think that was the basal wounding that I saw. It is obviously sealing, but I didn't have the historical context for that site. So I saw it 2 weeks ago. So again, I wasn't very aware of what occurred 2 years prior.
I would make a motion to remove. If there's no more discussion.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Takes us to 67 Colonial Drive.
Richards.
Oh.
Do you want to suspend the rules and bring out?
Richards. That was too good.
Second.
Yes.
Yes. I've got a floor, 409 Richards. I thought you just joined this meeting.
But some of the questions that were raised earlier that weren't answered are just aren't. But because the trees needs to come down, no question about that. Our only question is, how's it gonna look at, I'm sorry. Then you got much more questions than I do. I'm Steve, so like Jody, 449. It's a beautiful white ash, but it's diseased and have to come down, no question about it. Our only question, it's like a 3-foot diameter. And do we have a say in the trees that could be planted in its place? Like a couple of options.
Yeah, so historically, what Chuck Baxter, the former city arborist, has done is that we purchase trees for our plantings or spring plantings. And based on what was available and what we have, we give recommendations, or if you have a preference, generally speaking, we try and honor those requests. So we'll know more accurately what we have after we purchase the trees. And yeah, it's usually if a homeowner shows any interest in any specific tree, we try and accommodate that as best we can. We're trying to get something in there that and we can talk and go back and forth, but generally we try and accommodate it as best we can.
Can I get this tree that's on South Street?
For sure, absolutely. I'm putting together a very rough order list right now.
Okay, awesome. No, it's something thinking like you're replacing a 3-foot tree with an 1.5 caliber.
Yeah, it's
Can we chip in money, get a bigger tree? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to set precedent, but it's. Sure.
The thing to remember about tree growth is that the larger trees, when they're transplanted, don't respond as quickly as the smaller ones. We found historically that the smaller caliber trees grow faster and that they catch up that larger tree and then thrive even better. So you're experts. Yeah, so it really, we've gone away from the larger diameter trees. We found it.
That's what we. How long is this?
Location program.
So what are people seeing that are the defects or the unhealthiness of this tree? Is that it went clearly?
Yeah, yes, so we haven't done any inspections on it yet, but the signs indicate that it is emerald ash borer. There are multiple ash trees across the city that have it's a very distinct crown dieback. A lot of them are already putting out a lot of suckers or auxiliary branches that has shown that the tree is under significant stress. That is. So I wanted to post this tree just to have that conversation that there are trees across the city that are also ailing from this. They're not quite as, this was a very extreme case where it was a significant dieback, but and you can probably speak to that because you've seen the tree for years, but it's that's.
Do they cross contaminate with this? Is that how it's done, or just how does, if one has it, the other gets, others one gets it?
This insect just hits ash.
I know, but it doesn't hit just this tree, but not this ash tree.
It will hit all ash at some days.
Once one goes, it can affect.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they can travel like about a half a mile a year, even greater if the conditions are right. So really, there'll be multiple generations of EAB in that tree, and then eventually that tree they will just spread from there. So as I said, we have seen it in other trees across the city. It is something that we are taking on a tree by tree basis. Some trees we're waiting to see if treatment in the spring is a good option, or if the tree has already succumbed to EAB by then it's just a removal. So
we're going this fast as trees have for 3 years.
Yeah, it's a big tree. I'm just concerned. neighbors' houses.
Sure.
Trees.
Yeah, no,
and so-
you're absolutely,
What's
yes.
the timing of this?
The removal.
The removal and the planting.
So the removal, as long as it's approved, it will happen in the relative near future. It just depends on when it gets scheduled. And then planting, the next planting we're doing is in spring 23, so April of next year.
And do you smooth the ground out, because there's a huge hump there, will it all be?
Yeah, so when we do stump grinding, we try and get as many of those surface level roots as possible in the grinding. If it's obviously underneath the sidewalk or something where we don't really touch it, but we will do the best that we can given the site.
Okay, Steve and Jody, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is, I do bring work to appreciate it.
No, it's gonna be a motion now by Michael to recommend removal. Second by Joanna, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, go back to the Colonial Drive one, 367 Colonial Drive, failing Linden.
Yep, so this was a request that I had noticed, well, a tree, excuse me, that I had noticed while posting the trees for removal for the Panway sidewalk project. It wasn't quite half dead when I was looking at it, so it has dieback. It's just a very thin flipping tree. So essentially, it was just something I noticed, and I think removal is the path this tree moving forward.
We have a motion by Deb, second by Dennis, all in favor?
Mr.
Um,
Chairman, in the sake of time and this grueling meeting we've had, would it be possible to table 7 and 9, the city's request? Because quite frankly, I couldn't find what they were asking for.
So I can explain the 2 cherry trees down near the bus waiting area. So on the
Yeah.
Hanover side, there are 2 cherry trees that are shaded. And we've been working, the garage is currently under construction. And it really, the trees will help, removing the trees will make it easier to do the work. However, Max can speak to it better than I, but it's my understanding that those trees have been there a very long time and have not thrived. And it's probably not a good location for that species.
It's the site, so it's just not a good site. They've put 2 trees in what I could have seen as just a 1 tree site, but it's a very small area right next to a building. The soil looks very poor for this tree species, and so initially, just to kind of bring it back a little bit further about the project, the initial idea was to remove every tree along the Hanover garage, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to go in and prune so that there's a corridor for all these machines to get in that work and can go smoothly. But these 2 trees, yeah, they're kind of in a rough way, not a great location, and it would be very disruptive to many other city services if the trees were not, if these 2 trees are not.
So we have a motion to that effect. Someone? Second by Joanna, all in favor?
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I have a staff issue that I have to attend to. Max will take over the helm over here.
We have one community campus. City
Thank you,
request.
Peter. This has been a long meeting.
So any discussion about the community campus?
Before you do that, should you not anywhere?
If it's not a timely, does it need to be done this time? I'd love to read this.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So it's, so as you know, the community campus, the city now maintains the area. So there, so this project, there is an access road that we're trying to put in, and I'll put this really brief, but there's an access road to put in on the back of the playground. There are a couple of different projects, including 2 removals of hemlock that are failing, very thin canopy, but there's also a pine that is completely dead. The idea is we're going to remove these smaller trees. It's essentially in a forest, in the woods. And what we're really doing is it's enough space to have a vehicle go in and maintain that playground. It needs its own maintenance that I'm not very well aware of, but in doing that, it gives us an opportunity to remove this very hazardous pine that is completely dead. And then also removing these two other hemlock, which are failing and will likely need to be removed in the relative near future as well. So I'm sorry if that's, we're pushing the envelope for time, but that's, just want to give that context.
We have a motion to recommend removal.
Sorry.
Okay.
Take your time. So I saw the hemlock and I should have, but there were 3 beaches that
Yes.
had red ribbon around them.
Yes.
And the oaks, I'm not quite sure that I saw those. Oh, yes, I did. So my question is, so the 3 beaches have to go just to make a road wide enough so you can access it. There is a path there now.
Yeah, so the path, so at the corner of the playground, it's a fence. Essentially, that access road will be, the fence will be cut, a gate will be installed. So it's up that sort of little hill where you saw the flagging in the removal notices. Essentially, that's going to give us a corridor wide enough for a vehicle to go in and do whatever maintenance is required at the playground, just because it's something the city hasn't been maintaining. We've just, it is something now that the city has to maintain. So for us to do that effectively, there was no planning in place previous to our being here to maintain that playground. This road will allow us to bring it up to our safety standards. When we were there posting, there were children already playing, and
Yes.
it is, I view at least that pine in the immediacy that is going to get removed. It would be much easier to do and safer to do if we can just fell it after those trees have been removed and before that access road. And I call it an access road, but it's, all it is going to be graded. It's going to be just the soil. And it's essentially, we're just making a tiny little corridor. Those rocks, there's a little rock wall that will also be removed. And it's really just to facilitate that.
Okay. I also think I saw a couple of red hemlocks on the other side of the.
Yeah, not that we're not posted.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so were they inside the playground? I'm sorry if we're going a little long. If they weren't in the playground, that is something that we're not currently looking at. That entire campus is something, it's going to be a project for a very long time for our department, just because there has been no care given to all of those
Yeah,
trees.
it was close, wasn't inside.
Right, yeah, so primarily we posted this right away just because we wanted to get its approval so that project can go forward
Okay.
very quickly, essentially.
Thank you.
Dick, do we have a motion to recommend removal? This, seconded by Pat. All in favor? Will abstain.
I'll abstain. I didn't see it. I don't know.
I guess so.
Is it emergency, new or old business that we couldn't put off?
Well, wait a minute. What happens to this? The
So
two
that-
abstaining and
So that motion passed. Yeah.
Didn't call for a vote on it.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, 2 abstained, but you didn't
We have
call
two
for a vote.
abstains.
Okay, all in favor? Okay.
That's it.
sure anyone's gonna.
So are we put anything else off until the next meeting?
Absolutely. Just want to welcome Max and
Yeah.
you have a
Thank you.
great voice at the table.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Here, one quick thing in the 400 trees, we don't have our species selection back to us yet. I tried to get on the last meeting, I was in and out of Zoom. But we don't have all our species identified. They had some problems doing some of their sorting and digging and everything else. So we're gonna be meeting with Beth next week to get our final orders back. So once we have all those species guaranteed, we'll come back to the committee. Next time,
Really curious about seeing those. That'll be great.
Yeah.
So I put in a list of the top 5 that we wanted. We put in 3 or 4 more on that same list.
Yeah.
Well, my notes, I started the minutes that Chuck addressed most of that when it wasn't here. Just depends what they can give us back.
Is this the same list of 200?
These are the 200. We're buying them. They're all gonna go to you. They're all going to my place. We're buying about 50 trees. So sometime in March, I'll get a call with the trucks coming. I'll call you and you're gonna unload all these trees.
Right.
We'll store in our place, and we want to do this early April, just because all of us are so busy on our day that we don't need to add that to it. So it'll be a Saturday type event at my place. The trees, that kind of stuff, Peter,
Your list will be based on the ability.
based on the availability.
We done.
We are done.
Both of them.
Thank you.
Yes.
These small-